Now, if you're in the WordPress space, you've probably seen a lot of drama unfolding over the last week or so since Matt Mullenweg did his closing statements at WCUS in Portland. Well, I've been asked quite a few times what are my thoughts, and I do have some thoughts, but I don't want to just focus specifically on that. I am going to talk about it, but I want to look at WordPress in a broader picture and what exactly is going on, because I kind of do feel like we're kind of being a bit failed by WordPress right now. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still a massive fan of WordPress and I'm incredibly grateful for everything it brings to the table. However, that doesn't mean to say that we can't be critical and we can't look at the shortcomings of not just WordPress itself, but maybe the hierarchy behind it and some of the decisions that are being made. But let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about that issue with Matt Mullenweg. Now, if you haven't already seen it, I'll link to the video that's kind of sparked all this in the details down below so you can take a look and get up to speed. But let me give you a quick TLDR on what kind of happened. In the closing statement, Matt talked about how WP Engine, a hosting company that focuses specifically on WordPress, is not giving back enough into core WordPress. This is kind of 5 for the future terminology is being used, which basically means putting 5% back into WordPress core if you are making a profit out of WordPress. Now, this is where the first issue kind of comes in for me. I do agree that it is good to have people contributing back to core, whether that's financially, whether that's coding, whether that's manpower hours, all manner of different things. But this is not created equal. And this is one of the key points that really frustrates me about this whole situation. Let me just talk about some of these. First of all, if we take a look at what's considered to be the Bill of Rights to do with WordPress itself, there are a couple of key tenets. The freedom to run the program for any purpose. The freedom to study how the program works and change it to make it what you wish. In other words, you can get in, it's open source, you can get in, you can edit the content, edit the code, and make it into something different. The freedom to redistribute. In other words, you can redistribute the actual WordPress itself. Finally, you've got the freedom to redistribute copies of your modified versions to others. This is basically open source under GPL, which is a licensing system. So the whole concept behind open source is open for anybody to see the code, add to the code, modify, edit, and do what they kind of want with it. So this is where the first thing comes in. Okay, WP Engine, which is kind of pinpointed specifically in Matt's kind of speech, well, they're not the only company that's doing this kind of thing. Sure, they've taken WordPress, they built a hosting company around it, and they sell the whole package. But this kind of falls into the Bill of Rights. Sure, they're making money from it, but so's everybody's building websites, whether they're dealing with hosting, whether they're building websites for clients, for themselves, blogging, affiliates, all to do with WordPress. Everybody's making money off the back of WordPress. And that's kind of the whole point of it. It's meant to be there for anybody to use. So when you then pinpoint a specific company that is doing what hundreds, if not thousands of companies doing, including Automatic, you kind of undermine your argument immediately. And this is kind of frustrating. So what can we take from this? Well, maybe Matt should have been a little bit more broad in what he was saying and not pinpoint a specific company. So you have to ask yourself, why was WP Engine pinpointed in this way? Well, we don't know for sure, but there are certain things that are kind of leading to us making assumptions. These are assumptions, so please do take this with a pinch of salt. So let's take this back a couple of years, where Automatic, Matt Mullenweg, and so on were investors in WP Engine and promoted them as being a forward-thinking company that was doing great things for WordPress. But now, because a company called Silver Lake, which are venture capitalists, I believe, have bought WP Engine and they've changed the way the WP Engine is actually running, this really does seem to be more to do with the reasoning behind why this happened specifically to WP Engine and maybe not to others. This is a little bit unfair. Whatever beef you may have with that company, you should have dealt with it in your own time. If you had to go through legal routes, etc., 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 that's up to you. There's talk of dealing with confusion with WP Engine being WordPress. Let's be honest about it. 99.99% of people recurring probably have more of an issue looking at WordPress.com and not understanding the difference between .com and .org, getting confused. Not so much with WP Engine. At least that's the kind of feedback that I'm getting when you look at any of the conversations on Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever you want to kind of call it, all over the place. Kind of feels like a little bit of a argument point that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the same thing goes for the revision things. Again, you'll see what I'm talking about if you watch that video, if you've watched it. Now let's go back to this 5 for the future, which is all about investing back into WordPress to make an open source project a viable solution to give away for free. First of all, there's a lot of talk by Matt about Automattic investing thousands of hours, man hours, into contributing to core in comparison to the 47 hours, or I believe it's even less now, but 40 hours from WP Engine. There's no legal obligation for anybody that uses WordPress to invest time, effort, money, man hours, whatever, back into the project. Is there a moral obligation if you're making a good amount of money? Sure, you could have an argument for that. But again, there's no guidelines for how much they need to put in. There's no legal implication. They're not signing an agreement or anything else around it. They're literally, this is the goodwill gesture from other companies. Like I say, could they do more? Absolutely. But the bottom line is, you've got Silver Lake, I'm assuming, from what I'm seeing about people saying about how the quality of the service has gone down. I've never been a WP Engine user myself, so I can't even comment to that. There's talk that because it's now owned by venture capitalists, that they are more interested in the financial profits and less about the actual service being provided. How true that is, like I said, I'm not a user. I can't attest to it one way or another. But going back to that 5 for the future, this is one of the things that kind of frustrates me. There's not just those companies that are making money out from hosting and so on from WordPress. There's thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, maybe even more, all around the ecosystem that invest into the ecosystem. This could be developing plugins, themes, blocks for WordPress, educators, online educators, course creators, all manner of different things. People writing documentation on how to use WordPress. None of those are included in the 5 for the future. And to be honest, again, from what I see and from my own experience, there's no credit given back to those people for the time, effort, and potentially financial investment they put into it. So it feels like a bit of an unfair 5 for the future when it could be much broader, when more people could be included in that, as opposed to being very specific about what is actually included and what is not included. So maybe give a little bit of consideration to those people around WordPress core that do an awful lot for WordPress. And let's be brutally honest about it, if it wasn't for the themes, the plugins, and the people around it creating all these amazing tools and educational content and help and so on, WordPress would not be as big as it is today. This is what helps spread the word, make it easier for people to get into. And this is why no competitor, when it comes to competing with WordPress, has a hope in hell at this point in time of competing with its market dominance. So to wrap this portion up, the latest on this as of today, which is the 24th of September, is that there's now legal action being taken against Matt Mullenweg, Automattic, and funnily, strangely, WordPress.org, not .com, which is a little bit sad. But I'll link to this particular content in the details below. Actually, everything I talk about here, I'll link where reference needed down in the details down below, so you can check this out for yourself and get up to speed with it all. But this leads me on to my next set of kind of questions when it comes to WordPress. First thing, and most importantly, is who's WordPress for? You know, myself and the kind of circle of people that I kind of talk to and the Facebook groups and things like that that I'm involved in, we're all kind of designers, developers. We kind of build using WordPress, either WordPress full site editing and core, or more often than not, tools like Bricks and Elementor and Breakdance and so on. So this all sits on top of WordPress itself. But is WordPress still a blog, or is it a CMS? Because if it's a CMS, it's a pretty lacking CMS, and this is one of the kind of things that's being leveled at it. Why do we not have things like custom post types, meta fields, and so on? Why do we not have some of the basic features that we need additional plugins for built into core? Well, mainly, I think, because it isn't being marketed as a CMS. That just happens to be a happy byproduct of the blogging side of things. At which point, this probably would answer why people like us that are shouting quite loudly about what we would want to see in WordPress are not being listened to, and we're kind of basically being ignored by Automattic and those people behind the WordPress project itself. What makes me also believe this is probably the case is where I went onto a live stream kind of cohort thingy with some other YouTubers and some people behind Automattic that was set up by Anne McCarthy. The feeling that I got when I walked away from that was that they really have an agenda of their own, and the questions that were basically asked when I was involved in it didn't really get answered. They were basically circled around as something else was brought up in its place, which kind of made you feel like, this is useless, this is pointless, and it's just an exercise in talking to YouTubers to try to get them on board when they've been hypercritical of WordPress, full-site editing, and so on. You know, people like myself, people like Kevin Geary, and so on, we're very, very critical about what you can do with WordPress, where it's going, and the shortcomings of it, which I think we should be. You know, we do love WordPress, we love what it brings, we love what it allows us to do, but that doesn't mean to say you can't talk about the shortcomings and what you would love to see in it. But like I say, going back, I really don't think we are the target market, and I would love to see some information, some statistics that says what the user split is between bloggers, professionals that are actually going in there and just using it for certain aspects, those that are kind of building on top of it with tools like page builders and so on. I'd love to see that. So if you've got any details on that, please do let me know in the comment section down below. Link to those articles so I can take a little look. That'd be super useful. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about here. But if you want to find out more about my thoughts of the UX and where WordPress is, check out this video next. As always, my name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.